All right, what's up, guys? Happy Friday. Excited to have you guys all back. Today we've got Bill Miller. Um, Bill, what's the name of your company? I know you've got kind of your own facility. You kind of do your own thing, and then you've got kind of your training platform too, right? So what are you representing today, other than yourself?
So I train athletes out of Dream Big Athletics in Palatine, Illinois. We're a baseball facility where I'm really trying to grow the weight room. So I'm really more of the strength training and athletic performance guy here out of our facility here. And so I'll have players as well as a lot of my own personal clients out of this facility here.
Awesome. Bill came out to our facility back in 2000. What was that? 2017? Was that November of 17, or was it November of? Yeah. And about 2.5 years ago, and did a killer presentation for a lot of athletes, and really excited to have him. He's done a lot of work since then as well. So today's main topic is going to be assessing power and kind of what those power assessments look like, kind of how he came up with kind of what he does and the importance of it. So Bill, I'll kind of turn it over to you and kind of let you get started. If there's any other thing you want to introduce yourself with that I left out, feel free to do that as well.
No, I get right into it. So I guess the big thing that people see with me that's different looking than a lot of other strength coaches is I will use medicine velocity as my mean especially in the upper body. So basically what we're doing here is we're taking various loaded medicine balls and we'll be throwing them at the radar gun as hard as we can in different exercises like the overhead throw or a rotational throw. And the goal with these exercises obviously is to measure and see how well the athlete responds to different levels of load. So with a heavier loaded medicine ball, if the athlete is not performing very well, then we know that they are rather force deficient or they're a rather weak athlete. So what that tells me as a strength coach is they can probably gain a lot of strength in the weight room and see that transfer over to that medicine ball power, because that's something that's so specific to baseball, is that ability to transfer all that force and energy from the lower body through the upper body. And then, of course, on the opposite end of the spectrum, when assessing athletes, if they're not doing very well with that lightweight medicine ball, then they may be what's called velocity deficient, where they're an athlete who might have a lot of strength in the weight room, but with that light load at that high velocity, they don't do very well. So it kind of points you in the right direction as a coach, and it makes my job a lot easier. Instead of guessing how much heavy medicine ball throwing we should do, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can you kind of tell us, just more about, when you talk about like deficiencies and you talk about different things, from a hitting perspective or like a skill perspective, outside of just like what you're working on in the weight room, how it translates more to that specific skill too? Because you work with pitchers and hitters and things like that as well, right?
Oh yeah. I'll work with a lot, and so what we'll see mostly is like what I like to do is check boxes as a coach. So if I know certain boxes are being checked, but they're really lacking in a certain area, then that kind of points your training in the right direction. And this is why medicine ball throwing velocity is really, really nice with like a rotational shot put throw. So let's take an example, make it a little bit simpler. If we have an athlete who I'm watching them weight train, and their bench has gone up 50 pounds in a year, their squat has gone up 80 pounds in a year, and their deadlift has gone up. Everything is increasing in the weight room. And then we test their medicine ball throwing velocity, and that's also increasing. Everything, the boxes are all being checked, right? But then we take a look at their batting exit velocity, and we see that their exit velocity is still really struggling. They're still really struggling to improve at that specific action at the swing. So that to me spells out we need to address something specifically with the mechanics of the swing. And that's really what assessments come down to for me, is it's checking off the boxes if this athlete is struggling at certain areas or not. And then that should point us in the right direction of how we can really sort of address their deficiencies, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. What other types of assessments do you do other than, the power assessment, so to speak? And how long does it take to put somebody through that power assessment to kind of get some good feedback? And how often do you reassess their power?
That's a good question. So the assessment really takes no more than 5 minutes, but what I like to make sure is that the athlete is well prepared before going into that test. So a test that I do all the time is a supine medicine ball overhead throw, similar to like a sit-up style throw. And what the athlete will do is they'll go through throws with a 10-pound, a 6-pound, and a 2-pound medicine ball, evenly distributed weights. And then we'll just track and see how the velocities are increasing or decreasing over time. We'll probably test that every 2 to 3 weeks. And so what that tells us is like I mentioned before, if they're doing really well at the force end of the spectrum or the velocity end of the spectrum. And all we really have to do is take probably 5 throws at each ball. And so long as they're testing everything well rested, it should give us a really good glimpse as to how they're producing force at various loads. So that's one that we'll do all the time. Another one that we'll do quite a bit is a little bit different than the medicine ball ones. We'll do weighted jumps, and we're going to do those in our workout today in a little while. But with these weighted jumps, we'll take different loads: an unloaded jump, jump with 10% body weight, and a jump with 20% body weight. And we'll see how they're jumping, and we'll measure the height with the G-flight sensors and all that. And it's pretty cool to see how different athletes, some of them jump really, really well with load, but they can't produce power at all, and they don't jump very well without load. And that's really interesting to me. So that to me kind of spells out where they might be lacking as well.
For college coaches who maybe are at a smaller school, or even strength coaches who are managing, not just baseball athletes or softball athletes, but multiple athletes, what would you recommend to kind of just a base level? Obviously you're navigating this with all the things you've tested and tried, and your athletes kind of expect it. How would you start to integrate this if you're, a baseball coach having to kind of be in charge of the strength room, or weight room, too, in the strength program as well, especially if you're somebody who sees the value in really integrating both of those two things together?
Yeah, and that's a good question. So like the simplest approach to this, I've actually learned this from Chris Beardsley of Strength and Conditioning Research. And the one thing that he always talked about was have a measuring stick for your sport or for your sport training. And so for baseball, obviously we want to make sure that those athletes are throwing that medicine ball harder and farther every 2 to 3 weeks or so. If that's improving, we know that the strength training is working. So what I would recommend is find some sort of a measure that you can retest every 2 to 3 weeks that would be as specific to the sport that you're training. And if athletes are all improving that every 2 to 3 weeks, then we know that strength training is working. It's pushing the athletes in the right direction. If it's not improving, then you have to really look at the athlete's program and say, well, maybe we need to get more specific to those speeds and we need to work at higher velocities. Or perhaps you're looking at their program and saying, man, this kid needs to increase his bench press and his squat, and he hasn't done it yet. So maybe you find a way to progressively overload them in the weight room as well. And so long as you have that measuring stick, that is your tell. That's your compass for your program, if that makes sense.
Can you address when you would use a light medicine ball versus a heavy medicine ball, especially in a warm-up setting?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. So for the younger athletes that I train, typically speaking, we won't go heavier than an 8-pound medicine ball. And even in those weight ranges, like 6 to 8 pounds, we'll only be doing straight ahead or straight up and down movements, like a slam, straight up and down, or a chest pass. Very simple, easy movements to learn. And an 8-pound medicine ball for a younger kid, an 11 or a 12-year-old, an 8-pound medicine ball is kind of a lot. So we want to make sure that the movement is as simple as possible. They have one direction to go, and they go in it as hard as they can with good technique. But I would say with more of those rotational throws, you're probably going to want to even go lighter, like a 3 or a 4-pound medicine ball at most. You want to make sure that everything is being worked at with the proper technique first. And then as you get older, stronger, you have 3-4 years of weight training under your belt, then you can start throwing those 8 and 10 pound medicine balls rotationally. But at the younger, more developing ages, I would say a 3 or 4 pound medicine ball is heavy enough of a load for them to feel what they need to feel in those movement pattern drills. And then when it's time to speed things up, that 3 and 4 pound medicine ball is about as effective as you can get for them as well. So that's what I would say. And I think it's a good place to start for athletes. Of course, everyone has different equipment that they have at their house right now. So work with what you got. But I would recommend, if you're a younger kid who only has like a 10 pound medicine ball at home, just stick with chest passes and slams. They'll be very beneficial exercises, and you don't have to worry about movement patterns being ruined by a weight that's too heavy.
Awesome, man. Thank you. Last question, I think, before we get started into kind of your workout, and then if other people think of questions while we're doing that, maybe we can open it up at the end. There's a lot of things right out there right now about getting rid of the donut in baseball, getting rid of the overload. And I know you're really big on PAP training or post activation potentiation stuff. I know you do a lot of like isometric holds and things before you go into your jumps and whatnot. Would love to hear you talk about when you would use PAP and when you would do kind of the neuromuscular aspects of like really underload training to develop speed. Running down a hill, swinging a really light bat, like things like that. How do you integrate both those two concepts without saying one's better, one's worse, or do you think one is better, one is worse?
Well, that's a really good question. So I think you kind of started to point to what I was going to say. I believe that if you're an athlete who is rather force deficient, or you're rather weaker in the weight room, but you still have good velocity out in the baseball field, I don't think underload training would really do you all that good. You're already very good at the velocity end of the spectrum, and what's going to make you personally better is getting better at the force end of the spectrum, or working with more load. So from that perspective, I would say overload training would probably be more beneficial, so long as when you're swinging that under or overload bat, it's not negatively going to impact your swing path and movement pattern and things of that nature. So that's where I would say. And then on the opposite end of that, if you're an athlete like me who's been lifting heavy weights for years on end and you're slow, what you're going to want to make sure is you're training more at the velocity end of the spectrum. So that's when that overspeed training or that underload training would really be beneficial, in my opinion. Now, everybody has a different sort of take on it. You can kind of mix and match as you go. You don't only have to do one mode of training or the other. But I would say probably do higher volumes with what you're weakest at, and then try to address it like that. And then as far as the post-activation potentiation goes, what I've been doing a lot of is using what's called a potentiating warm-up. And I'm going to take you through that in a little while. But what a potentiating warm-up is, it's after your general warm-up where you've increased blood flow, heart rate, done your big movement pattern drills, you're going to want to do more of an intense activity, something that is going to increase that central nervous system activity and increase activation of the muscles involved. So that way, when you are going to swing or throw or lift that day, your body is primed and ready to go. So what I like to do before swinging is either rotational medicine ball throws, like a rotational scoop toss, or a maximal effort isometric hold, similar to what's called a pal-off press, which I'll show you guys in a little while. But that maximal effort movement really does help activate everything in the body. And that's how I like to use it most. I don't necessarily use it right before different exercises all the time in a weight room setting. Sometimes I will. But for the most part, it's in a warm-up setting that really seems to shine for those athletes, in my opinion, at least.
Sorry. Would you warm up the same way for a game that way?
I would definitely. I think there's far too many kids, especially when they have the time in the summertime, they'll just show up to games and just play. And that drives me nuts. If you have the time to do it, go through real warm-up. You only have 3 or 4 or 5 at-bats that day to shine. You only have a certain number of pitches to shine in front of everybody. Why wouldn't you want to warm up the best that you possibly can? It drives me nuts. So I got that in some college settings or some school settings, you show up to a game on the bus and you got to go right away. It happens. But when you have the time, do some sort of an isometric rotational hold, do some sort of jumps, sprints, things like that that could really activate the entire body and get it ready to perform. That's what I would do before a game.
What about in the pro setting? So, you get to the field at noon or 12:30 or 2 o'clock, depending on the day and what you have going on. You kind of go through the daily routine, maybe a team meeting, then there's maybe some in and out or some BP. There's a lift in there somewhere. And then, you got a lot of downtime from your lift before the game. And then, the game starts at 7 and, typically we'll get out there and, anywhere from 5 to 7 o'clock, players will start to filter out. And if should you get out there earlier and do something different after your lift that day, or is what you do in the weight room that day going to carry over as a warm up all the way through? And obviously they go through a dynamic stretch again, their legs and all that stuff. But is there more that hitters can be doing? I guess pitchers are a little different, but then there's the bullpen aspect. But just from a hitting aspect, you got to go play, right away. Or you're in the lineup. Is there something they should be doing, maybe even briefly, just kind of like a starter, or are they going to get the benefits of what they're doing in the weight room as a warm-up prior to going on the field?
So that's an extremely good question. It's one that I've honestly never thought of before. But I would say this. I would say so long as whatever you're doing, your time is valuable. You're not just wasting time going through running a ton of pulls before a game. You're not just wasting time in the weight room doing a bunch of curls. Whatever you are working on, make sure that is something that will be helpful as opposed to just a waste of time. So I would say this, if you know that your dynamic warm-up and your routine that you're able to do on a daily basis is working and you're not fatigued from doing too much, then I would say just stick with your routine because it's working. But the moment you say, man, like once game time hits, I need something extra. I need something right before the national anthem to get me ready to go. That's when I would say maybe come out 5 minutes early, chuck the medicine ball off the brick wall in the dugout, or do an isometric rotational hold. Do something like that. Do some squat jumps. And then if that extra little bit helps, then fit that into your routine. But, man, in professional baseball, it's not just about that day. It's about the entire 100-plus game schedules. So you have to be not doing too much that's going to fatigue, and cause problems,
Absolutely. No, thanks for going over that. If anybody else has kind of specific questions, kind of think about them. And then, Bill, I'll turn it over to you to kind of go through the workout that you're going to have these guys do, kind of our little quarantine workout. Appreciate you doing that.
All right, for sure. So the first thing that we're going to start with is just a very, very basic warm-up that I like to do with athletes. And then we're going to go into a mobility routine, and then we're going to go into more power production work at the very end. So one thing I've been thinking about a lot recently is how can we manage our time now that we have more time? With this pandemic, everyone has that extra couple hours in the day that they can spend doing whatever they want. And so for a lot of athletes that I was training before in our facility and stuff like that, now they're at home sitting around all day. Even if they had a nice workout for that day, they still have an extra couple hours to spend. And, so I was telling them, get into meditation, get into mobility work, fit this into your daily routine when you wake up in the morning or before you go to bed at night or before a workout session. Having mobility routines as a part of your daily lifestyle is huge. One mobility session is not going to make you super limber and increase your throwing velocity and stuff like that. But you stack up 200, 300 of those on a daily basis in a row, all of a sudden you're starting to move like a completely different individual. So as far as mobility goes, like what's the actual goal here? Is the goal to get super flexible? I wouldn't necessarily say so. Rather than true flexibility, it just in those deep end ranges of motion and in those big positions. So when we think about a throw, for instance, we have great rotation going on and we have great levels of layback going on here at the shoulder. And if you can't produce or if you can't get into those positions at all, you're probably not going to be able to throw very hard. That's just the reality of it. But if you can get into those positions, it doesn't do you very good if you're not very strong and stable in those deep end ranges as well. So before our mobility routine, we're going to go through a short warm-up, and then we're going to go right into the mobility routine. So the first exercise that I like to do when warming up, the very first one is a body weight squat with overhead reach. So you're going to be right here, squat all the way down, all the way up. Typically speaking, I'll go about 3 to 4 sets with an athlete, maybe 8 to 10 reps. But the body weight squat with overhead reach is a really good one because it's showing a lot of what's going on. If you're an athlete who really struggles with the body weight squat and overhead reach, you might be stuck right here in this position where you don't have a lot of upper back or T-spine mobility, or you might not have a lot of ankle, knee, and hip mobility to the point where your heels are starting to come off of the ground when you're squatting. So the body weight squat with overhead reach again, that's one that I like to do with every single warm-up, and it's been working really well with the athletes I train. The next one that I like to do is called a yoga push-up. Hopefully you guys can see me. Yeah. All right, so with our yoga push-up here, we're going to start in the top position, then we're going to get all the way down, coming all the way back up. So with the yoga push-up there, again, it's addressing T-spine mobility, that upper back mobility that's so beneficial for athletes. And it makes sure that we are able to press and control everything with our shoulder blades gliding. So when you think about the shoulder, it's a ball and socket joint. If that socket is not, oops. I'm going to go back. There we go. Sorry. If that ball and socket joint is not able to stay in line because those shoulder blades aren't fully gliding up and down, you're going to probably wind up with some sort of shoulder impingement or some sort of shoulder injury because those shoulder blades are not gliding wherever the hands go. So those are my 2 basic ones that I like to do to begin the warm-up setting. And we'll probably go 3 or 4 sets of 10 or so reps with each exercise. And then after that, what I like to do is a reverse lunge exercise where at the very bottom, we're going to squeeze every muscle as hard as we can in that front leg. And we're just going to hold this for about a 10 or a 15-second count. So something like that helps to open up the hips a little bit, as well as make sure that we're increasing blood flow throughout the lower extremities. And that's extremely important. That's the goal with this initial part of the warm-up here, is we're trying to increase heart rate, blood flow, and activate the muscles as well as we can. And then, similar to that potentiating style warm-up that I was talking about before, we're going to do something a little bit more intense. We're going to go with a split jump. So a split jump will look something like this. Just like that. Probably go about 2 to 3 sets of 2 to 4 reps each leg. We don't have to do too much. The goal is to be extremely fast and efficient when we're moving. We're trying to think about having the most explosive movement possible, and when we land, we stick the landing as well as possible. So I'll go one more time through that. So something like that is a warm-up that I would have athletes do before throwing or lifting, stuff like that. And I would want to make sure that that athlete is ready to go. If they're not ready to go, we can take a little bit more time. That's okay. The warm-up setting is more for you, and it should work for your specific needs. So let's see. Okay. Moving on now to something a little bit less intense. Now we're going to do some ground-based mobility drills. So let me see here. That should work. All right. So the first ground-based mobility drill that we're going to do is called a half kneeling adductor rocker. So with baseball players, the adductor, the inside of the groin right here, is one that often gets neglected. And it's one that if you lack adductor mobility, you're probably not going to be able to internally rotate the hip very effectively or brace the front leg very effectively. So I'll show from the side here.
Bill, while you're doing that too, I don't want to interrupt you, but just kind of as you're going through, I've got a theory that like we swing way too much in general, and not so much from a I guess just we do a lot of activity in the cage, right? Like we're not always very productive in the cage. Like we just swing to swing. We feel like we need reps. Some of the stuff you're talking about, bracing in the front leg, internally rotating hips, stuff that we try to get guys to do on a motor learning side. And there's obviously physical assessments we could figure out if that might be an issue for somebody before we even see them. But how much do you think, especially with you having your background in strength and working with hitters, how much of the stuff that you actually are really working with that you want them to do in the cage, you're actually working on it in the weight room?
I would say basically everything in the weight room is going to keep us safe so that we can continue to push things in the cage. You know what I mean? So you mentioned it pretty nicely. Like we probably swing too much. We probably do too much at that high velocity end of the spectrum with a lot of these younger kids. And so what begins to happen there is they begin to have that same rotational movement pattern going in one direction all the time. And so then we'll begin to see happening is maybe some lengthening actually happening at certain tendons. You might begin to see some compensations throughout the body where the spine begins to shift one way, the rib cage begins to shift one way. So basically everything in the weight room that we're trying to work on should address strength and force production, sure, but it should also try to make sure that it's correcting the body and getting the body back to a neutral and safe position so that those muscles surrounding those joints can handle that type of excessive force that we put them through on a consistent basis in the cage. And of course, it's going to make sure that the spine, the rib cage, everything is back in line the way it should be so that we're not getting hurt because we're swinging too much. I mean, you take any of your best hitters, they're the ones who swing a lot. That's just kind of how it goes. But we want to make sure that whatever we're doing in the weight room is going to ensure that they can continually swing and never sustain injury or anything like that. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. Awesome. Thank you.
All right, for sure. All right, so let's see. Moving on now. The next one that I really like, typically speaking, you can have a wall that you could use to balance yourself here. Hip, ankle mobilization. So we're going to be right here just rocking forward nice and easy and rocking back. This is another really nice one for the hip flexor as well as the ankle. What we see here with ankle mobility is that whenever a pitcher begins to throw, their ankle might start to leave the ground early before that front foot is even begin to land. And so if that ball if the heel is off the ground really early, they may be lacking some mobility here in the ankle to where they're not able to anchor down and really produce a lot of force because they lack ankle mobility. So we want to make sure that the ankle mobility is something that we're addressing here at that front ankle. So I would typically do 2 or 3 sets of, maybe 8 reps each side. Oops. Don't suck at this like me. But yeah, let's see. So the next one we have. Okay, so that's more of the movement pattern type mobility drills. But as I mentioned before, we want to make sure that we're strong in those deep end ranges as well. So what we can do is called an end range isometric drill. What we're going to do is get into a deep end range and isometric contract all the muscles in that muscle group at that deeply stretched position. And that should help strengthen the tendons and muscles in that deeply lengthened state. So the one that I like to do a lot, and it's really easy to teach, we're going to have a perfect posture here, feet maybe a little bit wider than shoulder width. Now from here, you're going to take your hands and push into a slight internal rotation stretch. And then from here, I'm actively going to try to push my knees out against my hands. So something like this, and push. Probably about 15 to 30-second holds works really well. If you're more of a beginner, you can try doing something more like a 5 to 10-second hold. But the goal here is to try and increase intensity with each set. So if the first set I pushed at maybe 60%, the next set I'm going to try to push at about 80%. And then relax, of course, after about 30 seconds or so. As I said, the goal there is to try and make sure that we're strong in those deep end ranges of motion. You could also address this with external rotation. I don't have it set up right now, but typically speaking, I'll get athletes into a nice deep pec stretch or into a shoulder external rotation stretch, and we'll push against that deeply stretched position and hold that isometric contraction for about 30 seconds or so. And that seems to work really, really well. So we only have about 5 to 10 minutes here before I got to wrap up. So I'm going to move on now to more power production drills that you can be doing at home.
Really,
so the first,
really fast, Bill. What was that stretch called?
Internal rotation isometric.
I'm going to write in the chat. There was a question. So go ahead, keep going. I just wanted to grab it. So you go ahead, go right back into your power production stuff. Sorry.
Seated internal rotation isometric contraction. So now moving on, if you have any sort of light dumbbells at home, this one works really, really well. So as you know, with baseball players, we have to make sure that we have very explosive hips. And when you're swinging the bat, obviously we're getting into that hip extension. And that's a big development, or that's a big part of power development for hitters. And so what we want to make sure we're doing is training for powerful hip extension, but we don't have means of, the trap bar deadlift and other things like that at home. But what we can do is grab those light dumbbells and go from a full pause on a box and jump as high as possible. Make sure you stick the landing, and obviously make sure that whatever flooring you have at home is something that you could jump on safely. And make sure you don't hit your head on a ceiling, of course. But typically I would go maybe 3 to 5 reps in a set. And I know that sounds really low because this is such a light weight. You could do it 20, 30, 40 times in a row if you wanted. When it comes to power production, we want to make sure that the speed of the movement is actually as high as possible, as often as possible. So for instance, let's say I was measuring my jumps right now, and my first 3 jumps were 15 inches. And then after my next 3 jumps after that, by rep number 6, I'm only at 12, 13 inches. And then if I keep going beyond that up to 10 reps, my last 2 or 3 reps might only be 10 inches. So those last 4 reps were only about 60% of what I really could be doing. And if I'm not producing as much power as possible on each rep, or at least close to it, I'm probably not going to get those powerful adaptations that I want from whatever exercise I'm doing. So one more time, the box squat jump with dumbbells. That's a really, really good one. Now, the other thing I'm sure somebody's wondering is, why are we going from a full pause? Why aren't we going through a full jump with the stretch shortening cycle? The one thing about the stretch shortening cycle is that it oftentimes takes away from the power production at the hip, because there's so much extra power production going around in the tendons and muscles surrounding the knee. That's not a bad thing, of course. We want to train that as well. But if you're solely trying to make sure that your hips are becoming as powerful as possible, you're probably going to want to work solely from a dead stop and be as explosive as you possibly can. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, another exercise that I like to have athletes do during this time is called a depth jump. Not a death jump with an A, depth jump with a P. So you'll have probably a 12-inch platform or something like that. I'm sure everybody has something like this at home. All you're going to do is step off the box and jump as high as possible immediately when you land. Again, like the box squat jumps, we're probably only going to go about 20 to 30 total reps in an entire session with plenty of rest between each one. What this exercise is going to do is it's going to help with the transfer of force from when that foot hits the ground and turn it into concentric force. Speaking, very, very quickly transfer all of that energy going downwards into vertical force that's going to transfer into our upper body. What I like to do with this one is measure what's called reactive strength index. And if the athlete improves their score with the depth jump, then we know that their front leg brace should have a better capability to transfer energy up the chain when swinging and throwing. And then I have, let's see, 2 more exercises and then I'll be finishing up. So I've talked about lower body force production. Now I want to make sure that I'm addressing upper body force production as well. The ballistic push-up or a clap push-up is one that works extremely well, especially for those kids who can rep out 30, 40, 50 reps in a row. We want to make sure that every single rep is as explosive as it can possibly be. So a clap push-up would look something like this. Something like that. Again, only about 5 or 6 reps in a set. That's all you would need. If you go much beyond that, you're probably going to lose power production over the course of the set due to fatigue. So you don't want to do that. Obviously, every single rep should be as explosive as it can be. For those who struggle more with push-ups, we don't want to be doing clap push-ups like this, something like that. That's no good. So what I would rather have them do is something like an elevated push-up. As fast as they possibly could with good technique. But in all honesty, if you're struggling doing push-ups, you're probably better off just going with regular old slow push-ups and get good at those. And then the last one, most people have medicine balls at home. If you don't, you could probably buy one online for pretty cheap. My favorite exercise is the rotational slam. We're going to rotate to the side and slam between the feet. With this one especially, you have to make sure that you are slamming that ball with absolute maximal intent. If you're slamming the ball like this and letting gravity do all the work, you're not going to get any real positive adaptations out of it. So that about covers it for the workout that I had planned. I know I didn't really get to go through a full-on workout with everyone, but hopefully you're taking some notes and you can do some of these things at home.
Yeah, man, that was awesome. Thank you so much for taking us through that. Does anybody else have any questions? I think a couple takeaways, just while you guys are coming up with questions, feel free to unmute yourselves and ask, so that way we don't have to go through the chat box, just to be efficient. A couple takeaways is when you're dealing with power, you don't have to do 1,000 reps. You can just keep it really simple. You mentioned that everyone has some kind of step up at home. I mean, you can do this off of a couch. You can do this off of, even if you have to take the cushions off to eliminate that. If you guys have a front porch, you guys can do it off a front porch. things like that, just to make sure the landing's safe. You guys can get creative with some of this stuff. If you don't have a med ball, something that we've done too is you can use a small drawstring bag with maybe something heavy in it, like get creative, something soft, hopefully, and heavy, but something you can kind of put in there from that aspect. So if you guys have any questions for Bill, now would be the time to kind of go through it and ask him. Anybody have anything? Tanner, you can go ahead and unmute yourself if you're able to. Which were you talking to me about? What bag? Or is that a question for Bill?
Yeah, I was asking you what was the alternative if you don't have a medicine ball?
I was saying to do a drawstring bag, and basically what I would do is I would put something heavy into it and wrap it up and kind of slam it down that way. So I don't know if you have a drawstring bag or something with there. You could use books. Trying to think of other things that might be softer and heavier. If you've got plyo balls, right, and you're trying to get up to a certain amount of pounds, put a bunch of plyo balls in a drawstring bag and slam those down. I mean, those should be able to take force too on that side of things. So that's kind of an alternative. I know right now everyone's trying to be creative. I think another good thing that long term is going to come from having to be creative in the weight room is, especially as players, when you guys are traveling and you guys are doing hotel trips and you're you're trying to figure out what to do in that hotel weight room, it's they don't really have what I need, so I'm not really, I don't really want to do anything that way. Now we can get to a point where when you do go on those trips and we're back to baseball and baseball activities resume, you can be really creative in your hotel room and at the hotel weight room and things like that. You don't just have to say, oh, well, I don't have the squat rack, or I don't have this, or I don't have that. Hopefully these sessions have provided something for you on that regard too, so you can maintain it. And I think even for adults, and I know myself included, as you guys get older, a lot of these life lessons, so to speak, is when you're on business trips or sales trips or whatever you're doing, family trips, and you're trying to get your workouts in, we can be creative too and practice what we preach. So on that side of things. Any other questions for Bill before we move on to Dylan? Going once, going twice. All right, awesome, guys. I really appreciate it, Bill. Thank you so much for donating your time and doing that for us. That was awesome. Great presentation. And we're going to move on to Dylan. So Dylan's a pitcher in the Reds organization right now. He's got kind of a cool story. He's played with a couple different organizations. He's going to kind of talk to us about just kind of what he does and what he's doing kind of right now to stay healthy and stay in shape. And then also do maybe a Q&A. So current professional player that if you guys have questions for, definitely think of him as he's talking too. We'd love to be able to share some of his wisdom and knowledge with you guys. Dylan, I'm going to turn it over to you if you kind of want to introduce yourself.
All right, cool. Do you hear me and everything?
Yeah, we're good, man. Thank you.
All right, sweet. Yeah, so thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me on. Basically, my story is born in Canada, ended up moving to Chicago to play sports, and then was lucky enough to get a chance at college, got drafted, and then long story short, I'm on my fourth team now. And when I first got drafted, by the time I got released from my first team, my average fastball was 87, and now I have it up around 95, 96. And I'm kind of just going to take you guys through some of the stuff that I did to get to the point I'm at now. So basically, the thing for me was changing my mechanics and then how to do that. And then also in doing that, I learned a lot about having confidence. So when I was first with the Orioles, I took it seriously, but I didn't take it 100% seriously. And so getting released was the best thing that ever happened to me. So it completely just turned a switch for me. And so I took baseball as my job, which it is, and ended up turning my career around. And now, baseball comes back, I got a chance to make it to the top. So I was just going to take you guys through kind of my plyo routine that I do. And we'll start there. Share my screen. All right. Is this working? Can you see my screen?
Yeah, man, we can. Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you.
So basically, I use plyo balls, and this was a thing for me to change my mechanics. I took it from being super long and then became compact. And then the main thing I want to say about this is I know that weighted ball has a bad reputation. Like anything, it's a tool. So I don't want you guys to just see me doing plyo balls, decide to go buy some, and think that if you just go throw them without a plan that you're going to get better. So that's just not how it works. So you need a detailed plan and everything. And so I'm just going to show you kind of my warm up. I do this every day before I throw. And as you'll see, nothing lacks intent. So first, these are reverse throws. And basically what I'm trying to do here is just warm up my decelerators and get my arm going. So as you can see, basically I'm just taking my hand and throwing the back of it at the wall and keeping this front knee nice and stable. So just warming up back right here. That's a pretty straightforward one. And then the money maker, in my opinion, this is called a pivot pick. And so basically, I'll show you guys. When I was with the Orioles, my arm action used to be super long like this, and I'd throw pies. And like I said, I was throwing 87. So that just didn't get the job done, and the Orioles proved that to me by releasing me. And so I found kind of some driveline type drills, and I ended up changing arm path specifically with this drill. So if you see, my feet are facing forward towards the wall. I have my right foot forward, left foot back. And so I try to keep my arm nice and compact right here. And then just throw. And the reason I'm throwing it into a wall here is to take away the result of it all. So if I'm working on some type of mechanical thing and I'm playing catch with a catch partner, throwing off the mound or something, I could do a perfectly good mechanical throw. And if I airmail it, then all of a sudden my head's like, oh no, like that was a bad throw, when in reality it was a good throw. So I still do have a target. I'm aiming to the right of my head. So I can go right there. So that's going to simulate as if I was playing catch. So if I had a catch partner, he'd be here. So every single throw I make here, I'm trying to throw it to the right and head height. Here's another one. So if I pull this in front of my head right here, I'm going to cut the ball. So this gives me the good backspin release. And this would be the best drill, in my opinion, that somebody could learn. Next one is just a roll-in.
Hey, Dylan, really quick, are we supposed to be able to see the video play on these?
Oh, yeah, I'm trying to share it. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, so we have a frozen picture of you it looks like to do a reverse throw. Can everybody else see it? Is it just my screen? Or is everyone else having that same problem? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm having the same problem.
Okay. I don't know why. Can you share?
So I can see your cursor too. It looks like it's just not playing the video. There you go. There, that's moving now.
It's moving?
Yeah.
All right, that's my bad.
No, that's okay. I just want to make sure before we kept.
Yeah, just go through it quick again. Sorry.
Yeah.
Reverse throw, warming up the back of my shoulder, making sure that it's the back of my hand going through the wall, and I'm not just turning it over. Pivot pick, keeping the nice compact arm action right there, and throwing it to the right of my head. We still good, right?
Yeah, it looks like the video is just kind of like choppy.
Really?
Yeah, if what we can do, if you want to maybe just talk about it and maybe just do it dry with where you're at right now, and then
okay, you can see me clear though?
Yeah, I can see you clear. Yeah, your screen. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So here, I'll do that. So basically, if I'm trying it towards you, I got my right foot forward, left foot back, and basically I'm eliminating my lower half from this. All right, so just come here, nice compact arm action. I'm not trying to get long here, just right here. Let the arm unwind, throw, and I always want to throw to the right of my head right here, because if I don't, then if I'm throwing it right in front of me, the ball's going to come off like this, almost as if it's like a cutter. So if I throw it to the right of my head here, then it's going to come, it's going to be true spin. And a lot of people that use the plyos, if they're throwing it right in front of their head, all of a sudden they create a bad habit of throwing cutters. And then the next one is just a roll-in. So I'm trying to keep my my feet, when I'm walking towards you, I want to step in straight so that my hips are open, and I'm just going to close everything off and throw. All these are drills that are tailored to me also, so each person shouldn't do the exact same drills that I'm doing. But I guess just to sum all the plyo stuff up, it's my routine. And for me, the biggest difference between when I was with the Orioles when I didn't have success to when I was with the Giants and now the Reds, where I do have success, is I have a routine. And so when I'm out on the mound, I know that I've done my routine and I know I've put the work in. So I have confidence. Whereas with the Orioles, I just kind of showed up to the field, and it was whatever. And I'd be out on the mound and I'd be nervous. And I could never find killer instinct, I guess. But now when I'm out there, I have supreme confidence and I just know I'm going to get the job done because I've done my work. And then besides that, that's my biggest message is just, if you want to take baseball or whatever sport you play to the highest level, you need some type of set routine and work ethic to get you there. And I think I could be a good example of somebody who didn't have one and then ended up getting one, and it took me to another level. So I'd say I probably got to the Orioles on natural ability alone, and it stalled out. And that's for everybody. Your natural ability could take you to high school, it could take you to college, but eventually, if you don't have that work ethic to match that natural ability, you're going to get passed. And that's what happened to me. People that I was ahead of outwork me and then pass me. And I've been spending the past, 5 years now trying to play catch up. And I finally did. So my message and lesson would be do what I did and have to play catch up like that.
That's awesome, man. And just you're a really, really tall guy. Do you want to tell everyone exactly how tall you are? You talk about natural talent and things like that versus maybe somebody who's wasn't necessarily blessed with that body type.
Yeah, so I'm 6'9", so I'm I'm naturally gonna get a couple more opportunities, and sorry, but it's just kind of what it is because I'm an outlier and it's different. And I know that, but at the same time, my outlier natural ability took me to a certain level, and then it got ugly. Let's just say that. If you want to, you can go ahead and look up my numbers and look at 2015, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And then after that, I made all these changes, and I've been lucky enough to get 3 extra opportunities actually coming out of indie ball, and pretty much my dream team with the Reds because it's all the same, I guess, sights on pitching, and I don't know, I just feel like I'm in a good spot. So I want to call it lucky, but at the same time, I think I might have.
That's awesome, man. Can you talk a little bit about how many different people that you've kind of pulled information from? So when you and I first met, you were at Push with DJ. Obviously got that shirt on. Great dude. And you were also doing some stuff on basically working with Josh. You've obviously picked up a lot of things from Driveline. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey there and how you're able to gather information from a variety of different people and apply what makes sense for you? How do you navigate that problem with so many different voices? And also just being an athlete and wanting more information, how do you seek certain information out and then maybe filter it from what you're actually going to use and not use?
Yeah, so obviously DJ was a big help for me. He got my strength stuff going. When I showed up, I was super weak, and then he got all my deadlift stuff up. Josh Heenan has been a really good resource on the PT side and some other stuff. And then I've also with Luke Haggerty. I don't know if you guys know his story. He's 38 and he's making a comeback now. He's throwing 97. So he's somebody that I could talk to because he got knocked down. He was a first-round pick with the Cubs. He was in big league camp about ready to break with the team, and then things happened. But just taking knowledge from each person you meet is going to be the biggest thing. You should never just believe in one person because no one is 100% right. And you should never just completely discount someone because they might have one thing that will help you. And then it's basically just trial and error because there's no perfect way to pitch. If there was, then everybody would do it, and whoever created the perfect way to pitch would be the richest man alive, basically. So just each person will help you along your journey and then test it out. And if you don't like it, then you just move on. But to discount someone or to treat somebody as the end all be all is, I don't think, very smart. But so if you can take one thing from each person to make you better, then you're going to be moving in the right direction.
Awesome, man. I'm going to open it up to questions now. So players, if you guys have, questions or things like that, definitely feel free to answer them. Just go ahead, just like normal. We'll go off of, just take yourself off mute and go from there.
I got one, Coach. So do you suggest with the plyo ball routine staying light and heavier?
So it's each person. So like obviously a younger person, it's just certain people with different, just kind of, I would need to see you throw. I'd need to see how you move in the weight room and stuff like that. And like I said, it's a tool. Any tool can be used really good, and then any tool can be used in a really bad way. And that's kind of where the plyo balls have gotten their bad reputation, is driveline does a really good job, but then there's other people who say they do driveline, but then all of a sudden they're having a kid that hasn't thrown a ball in 4 months come in and rip down a 1 pound ball or something crazy like that. So it's just, you need to figure out what is best for you and then implement from there. And also just using it safely is the biggest thing. You want to do something that's trying to make you better, and either A, be doing a drill that's bad for you, or B, doing something that's going to get you hurt. If that makes sense.
Thanks.
Good question too. Yeah.
Does anybody else have any other questions? I know the other thing too, we talked about on one of these other calls, we were talking about kind of expectations is like position players, like needing arm strength too. Dylan, maybe you can kind of speak on that just at the levels you've played at, like how strong are the position players' arms that play like shortstop, center field, catchers, like things like that?
Yeah, I mean, they all have cannons, just period. So each level you go up. So like high school, you'll probably have one kid on the field that's just got like a rocket arm. And it's like, whoa, can't wait to see him throw. You go to college, it's half the team. And then you go to low A, and it's like, dang, everybody's got a good arm. And then as you keep going up, dudes in the outfield in the big leagues are pulling down 105 on throws to home. So it's like, yeah, position players do need it. And then kind of off topic on that, the biggest thing that the plyos do for me as a bullpen guy is, say if I know I'm going to be the closer, and we're heading into a game that it's kind of like a closed or a safe situation, I can go in the 7th and throw my plyos, and then as soon as my name's called, I need 6 more pitches because I've already made my throws. Whereas you'll see like other guys, even in high school, bullpen, if you're a starter, you'll see get Carson hot or whatever, and all of a sudden the dude's here doing for legs, and all of a sudden you're putting your team in a bad spot and you're not ready. But yeah.
Awesome. So Cade has Cade's got a question. It's kind of broad, so I'll let you kind of maybe pick there. Cade's a youth player. He wants to know, what's the best thing to do to improve arm strength. Obviously, there's a lot of different factors that kind of go into it. And Bill kind of touched on it as well, knowing kind of where you need to fit into, whether it's a velocity-based training, force-based training. And obviously there's different aspects for you. What advice would you give to a young kid who maybe, I don't know what kind of resources Cade has. Cade, feel free to unmute yourself and share some of those if you want to. But what's kind of some advice you would give to young players who maybe too don't have all the resources to get the proper plyo care routines? That it's just, you're trying to just go off a book, or you're trying to go off of YouTube, or what somebody says. What's something simple that you would recommend that you've seen kind of work for guys?
I mean, arm strength is broad, but I would say the biggest thing is, especially for younger kids, is getting strong. I mean, I'm not going to put a kid that's 135 pounds and barely pick up his shoe to put it on because it's too heavy. I'm not going to put him on ELO program. So first you need to get strong, and then we can build from there. But if you answer for especially a young kid on how to throw harder or whatever, get strong. And that's arm care is total body care. So the stronger you are everywhere else, and this is every person I kind of work with has the same views. You need to be strong, do what you want to do, because if you have a dude throwing 100 super weak, that's kind of a ticking time bomb. So to kind of echo Bill's statement, get strong.
Couple more questions popping up. Do you use the wrist weight routine as well?
Yeah, I do. Also sparingly in the off season, I will when I'm traveling. It's a bad answer, but I just don't carry them because it's $20 or not $20, 20 pounds. And if I'm flying on a plane, then you can just imagine where that would run into problems. But I do like the wrist weights. Again, it's a tool. It's got to be used right. And that's basically just arm care type stuff too. I don't think the wrist weights alone are going to gain you velo, but it's not going to hurt if you do it right.
Awesome. As a reliever, what is your routine game day? Specifically, which plow throws and when do you do them? Pregame, in-game, etc. So you mentioned already that if you're going to go in the 9th, you might start in the 7th. But what's kind of difference between maybe a long relief or a short relief instance there, or a start?
Yeah, so I mean, it's likely gonna be the same. So as a reliever, it's really the only one I know with this routine, but I'll elaborate on that. So when I show up to the field, we show up at 12 or whatever. I have my mobility routine and all that. It takes an hour. We do team stretch, and then before I throw, before we play catch, I'll go through my plow routine. So that's gonna be the reverse throws, pivot picks, some roll-ins, and then just some like actual wind-up type things. And then I don't have like a set number on the throws. It kind of I want to get ready and then feel like I've done my routine, my arm pass on time, everything. And then when I'm going to get into a game as a closer, I'm doing pivot picks and then I'm pulling some down so my first throw when I step on the mound, I can throw it as hard as I can and I'm not in a bad position to do that. Starter, then I would probably have a set routine of a certain number of throws. I'd go reverse, pivot picks, roll-ins, and then just kind of go through each ball on the wind up type stuff. And then I have a post throw routine. I mean, if you could take one thing, that's good, but I think having like a set routine, like, all right, if I pitch in this game, I know that I did this before, and then after I go into the weight room and do my arm care recovery type stuff. And then, so you know that you're going to be ready to go the next day type thing.
Awesome. Ella, so she asked, she plays softball. Can these drills apply to softball also? I'll kind of take that one. We've trained a lot of softball players in our facility with various, different plyo care drills. And if you're looking for softball specific plyo care, there's in the Slack channel. You actually can get those at a discount through S2 Breakthrough. So just make sure you send her a message if you're looking for just the basic, general plyo cares too. We use Silverback. You can go to driveline.com and get them as well. I think all their stuff's discounted too. But yeah, we've had a lot of success training softball players in overhand throwing because that is a metric that's being looked at a little bit more in that recruiting realm that I've heard anyways from that aspect. So good question, Ella. Let's go down a little bit more real quick. Tanner's got a great question. He's talking about getting gains before puberty and after puberty. And I know, we've heard really smart guys like Eric Cressy say, puberty is the best velocity trainer, right? That's the best velocity program. What's kind of your take, and maybe when did you start seeing, obviously you were well into puberty when you were throwing 87, but now you're throwing 95, 96. But 87 is still pretty hard for high school kids and things like that. When did you start to see gains like that? Even maybe not having as good of a routine that you had through, that you've gotten into now.
I mean, obviously it's going to be the best thing. So for me, growing up, do not follow in these footsteps. We didn't know, like, I was in Canada. I was in North Ontario, Canada. We didn't even really have baseball. So I was just kind of playing, and then we'd have to travel 4 hours for a game, but I just played. And then naturally, yeah, it did gain me velo, but even before you can start to gain strength and a plan. Obviously, yours is going to be different from somebody older than you, but I wouldn't just sit back like I did and just count on puberty to give you a velo gain, because maybe it will, but also, like, we've all seen people that it just didn't. So don't use puberty as like, oh, my velo is just going to come here. Like, no, you can work on it. So.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely harder to see like massive gains. The biggest thing, the best way is I've heard it described and that I've kind of seen it applied is, you're building like a thin base layer, of your muscle, and you're patterning. You're learning how to move. You're learning how to do that stuff, so that when that hits, you can pack on, the weight that's going to come with puberty. You're going to pack on that extra strength. From there, you're basically setting the table, building the foundation, so that when puberty comes, it's easier to build that building from the ground up, rather than just start on top of it. And Tanner, I think you hit on that too in your question when you said it's still good to have a routine. Tanner's got another question. He says, I don't know if you have ever had to deal with this, but I feel like when I play, I'll warm up before the game, and by the third inning, my arm feels like it's cold again. Do you have any ways to stay warm during the game?
So I'm assuming he's a position player. And then I just want to kind of elaborate on his other question. So yeah, we want to create like a baseline for skills at scale. So you want to be kind of having the intent of these games. And then once you hit puberty and all that, it's going to take off more, basically what you said. But we want to create a routine or an intent so that we just continue that. You don't want to just be, trying to train skills that just aren't going to scale to the next level. And the keeping your arm warm, as a position player, you should be throwing stuff in between innings, but if you wanted, you could get like a 5-ounce plyo ball and just kind of flip it against the ball 3 times in between inning type thing, or just like get a couple off. That would be my recommendation. But yeah, other than that, it's a good question.
Yeah, and we've had guys, even do that in between their long innings. I like long innings, obviously, as being a hitting guy. When we're in the dugout for a while and our pitcher's sitting getting cold, it means we're doing something right at the plate. But at the same time, we want him to be ready and get back out there and make sure we can try to win the game and avoid them from scoring runs. And we've had guys do that too, where they take their plyo carries out and they do them, in between those long innings. So if that's something that you feel, might get you warm again. But yeah, obviously those throwing the ball in between innings, when their first baseman's rolling you your grounders and stuff like that, take those seriously. I've seen a lot of, and Tanner, I know you play shortstop too. I've seen a lot of guys make that throw from like deep third base as a shortstop, just to like make sure that they're there. They're trying to keep it low. It seems like a little bit easier throw in the game when they're actually playing, shortstop from a regular depth or up the middle, things like that. So get creative with it. That's a really good question. I remember definitely certain things like that. Timmy Lurk has a good question. What leg exercises do you do to get loose before a game?
To get loose, I have a really long mobility routine. Yours would probably be shorter than mine, but being so tall, I have some restrictions in my legs. So, I have an hour-long thing that I do on my own, and then we do the team stretch. A lot of hip stuff, so it would be hard to get into depth on that, but just things that can open up your hips. Hip mobility is going to be the biggest thing. I know it's the same thing with hitting. So just look up hip exercise. Hip cars are good, and there's a bunch of other stuff. That's a strength side question, so I have somebody make my program for me. Bill would be a good resource. There's plenty of good resources out there on stuff to get you warmed up.
Yeah, and can you kind of talk a little bit about, what cars do for you?
Yeah, so it just gives me – I'm trying to work through range of motion. I first started with DJ Edwards here. My hips literally, couldn't move. So just freeing that up, I just feel better. I feel like I can run faster, throw harder. It's just basically giving me more range of motion to be able to get into positions that I want to, be trying to throw hard.
And if you guys are going to look it up, controlled articular rotations. And you can do those in a lot of different aspects of your body too. It's not just your hips. Something to be, curious about. Controlled articular rotations. Awesome. Well, hey, Dylan, I want to be respectful of your time. I really appreciate you coming on. That was awesome. Thank you so much for doing that. If anybody has, one more question, we can go through with that. So we'll kind of just unmute yourself. Don't put it in the chat, and we'll go from there. Anybody got anything? Coaches, softball players? Awesome. Dylan, thanks, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you, guys. And if you have any questions, reach out to Ryan, and I'd be happy to help. But I appreciate you guys taking the time and listening. It was fun.
Really quick too. I know you're doing some remote stuff. I wanted to showcase that too. You are helping guys program and kind of do some stuff right now remotely. If you want to maybe just in the chat, I don't know if you have access to that on your computer or not. Put down your info, and if someone they want to reach out to you and work with you in some capacity. If you're taking on new clients, I don't know if you are or not, but want to make sure.
Yeah, so I'll be taking on a few clients and basically giving you a throwing program tailored to what worked for you. If you want to work with me, I'm putting my email in right now. Just send me an email, or if you just have any questions, feel free to email me. Media, I'm decently active on there. So whichever way works for you guys, just let me know and be happy to work with you guys.
Awesome. Perfect. Great, man. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you.
See you, man. All right. So what I'll do is I'll kind of go into our devotional now. Today I've got just a quote that I kind of want to talk about. A really good Bible study yesterday. We do those every Thursday, 5 to 6. If you want to be added to that group, just shoot me a message. We're not trying to be obnoxious about it or anything. Just want to make sure you guys know that that's out there. AJ's been doing a really, really good job. I've had a lot of good questions, a lot of good conversation on it. So today, kind of going off of that is, his whole message is faith during uncertainty. And just this quote, it kind of always hits me in a lot of different ways, especially during times of struggle. And I think we're all kind of struggling right now, waiting to see what's going to happen, what's going to go on. And this quote is, "You did not come this far to only come this far." And it really kind of hits me in a way of there is a plan. And if we think that it's over, it's not. And if we're at the end and this is just it, there's either a next step or something that's going to lead into another door that's going to be opened, that's going to kind of catapult us through kind of a variety of tough times. And I didn't have necessarily a full 5 minutes on it. It's just a quote that I think really sticks with me. Every time I see it and every time I think about it, that's kind of something that keeps me going. And the quote is, "You did not come this far to only come this far." And that can be, training really, really hard and not having the season that you want. It can be having a great starting off or the really good season and then having it, get ended and having to kind of restart and go from there. So I think there's a lot of different ways to do it, but there will be a door that's open and there will be an opportunity to make the most out of what you guys have. So that's all I got on that front. What we'll do now is kind of like normal. We will we'll ask if there's any other questions. I guess we got a kind of a small group, so feel free to unmute yourself, or if you have a topic, we'll go from there. Kind of Q&A wrap up type deal for just the day, and then what we'll do is, if there's any college coaches or coaches in general that want to stay on afterwards, we'll have a small little discussion from there. So. Anybody got any thoughts? Going once, going twice. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, guys.